Hi everyone, Jane here. Thank you for watching today, and welcome if you're new and welcome back if you're returning. Now, I haven't played in my Khadi Fat Book for quite a while, so I thought I'd get it out and have a little play around with these paints. Now, these are the Rosa gallery paints, and I did do a video about them recently, so I will link that at the end of the video. But I really only sort of tried them out on their own in my video, and I didn't really get to play around with them too much, mixing them together. So I decided to use what was left on this palette and just put the colours out, mingle them together a bit and see what sort of background I can create. Now, when I originally swatched them, I didn't see an overly lot of granulation in some of the colours, but actually on this paper, which is quite a rough textured paper, I saw a lot more. So the colours, I will list them in the description box below along with everything else as usual, but the colours were olive green, green quartz, royal green, and then I had turquoise, violet quartz, nightfall, violet, caput, mortuum, and finally I added a bit of the Idanthrene grey sort of around the edges just to sort of give a little bit of a border to the piece. I wanted to use a selection of collage today, so I've already gone ahead and cut out some pieces, and I used images from 3 different books, which I just showed you there, which were the Spooky Personas, the Fungus, and the Botanica. So here I just sort of laid them out roughly where I thought some of the images would go, because I wanted to add a little bit of sort of gentle stamping in the background. So I've got 2 stamps, and the first one I'm using is from Darkroom Door, and it's called Grid, I do believe. And I just wanted to add a little bit of sort of very light texture into the background. So I'm using, I think it's Dusty Concord from the Archival ink range. And then this stamp is by Aall and Create, and it's Intersecting Circles. And I wanted this to be a bit more sort of prominent on the page. So I'm going with my black Archival, but because of the sort of paper that it's going onto, and maybe the ink pen may need re-inking, it's not as deeply black as it might normally be, which I actually quite liked. I didn't want it to be too intense. If you are ever using a black ink pad and you don't want it to be quite as intense, the thing to do is just to sort of blot off your stamp before you then stamp it, and you'll get a lighter image. I sort of was looking at where the images went, and I decided I still needed some more in the background. So because I knew I was going to use that moon in the page, I thought I'd go for a bit of a sort of galaxy night theme to the page. So I've got this stencil, which I think came with a magazine. I'm not really sure. It hasn't got a name, so but it's just any starry type stencil would do the same job. And I'm just using my basic sort of Hobbycraft acrylic gold paint with my stippling brush and just stippling it across in different places on the page. And some of it I'm trying to sort of make fall off the page, and other bits more into the center. Now, I only ever put a small amount of acrylic paint out at a time, because once it's out it will start to dry almost straight away, and you don't want to be wasting a lot of paint. So I put a little bit out, and then if I need a bit more, then I just squeeze another little drop out after that. I also do make sure to clean my stencils off usually if I'm using paint or paste, just because after a while they can clog. I still wanted more in the background, so I wanted to carry on with that galaxy theme. So I'm using this white, I do believe it's the drawing inks from Winsor & Newton. They do need to have a good shake and stir usually, because they do tend to separate quite quickly once you leave them to stand. Then it was time to add all of that beautiful collage. So I had to sort of get an idea of what was going to go where, and I often lay things out first, because you need to know what you're going to need to stick down first. Now, I wanted to give her a little bit of grounding basically that just means something to stand on so she doesn't look like she's floating in midair. So I've got a bit of washi tape. This is an Aall and Create one as well, and I don't know what the name of it is. But I was sort of just having a little play around, seeing how I think she would stand. And I tore the tape because sometimes I find if you just tear a strip of the tape off, it looks a bit blunt, it looks a bit unnatural. So I tore it in half, and then I tore other bits off, but then I just rebuilt them up. So it gave a little bit of more of a higgledy-piggledy sort of look to the ground she was standing on. So I knew the moon had to go first. So what I did was, after I'd placed it, I looked at sort of what was in the background of where the moon was before I then stuck it down. Now, when you are sticking on top of something like watercolour or distress ink or any product that is water reactive, even if you leave it to dry, even if you heat set it, there is always a chance that certain mediums will reactivate if you start messing about with collage medium on the top, because obviously collage medium is wet, and if you're scrubbing it with a brush, then there is a chance it will move. Now, certain watercolors I find don't seem to move as much as others. I find if you use it on certain papers, it might sink in more, but I do tend to use my heat tool to set it to make sure that it's had the best chance to dry. And when I'm adding my collage medium, if I know I've used something that could reactivate, I'm a little bit more careful. Now, if I was using something like acrylic paint in the background, then I wouldn't need to worry, because that once it has dried, acrylic paint is permanent and it doesn't matter what I put on top, it's not going to move and it's not going to change. I don't overly mind if my watercolours or things sort of move a little bit, but sometimes it can give a bit of an ugly look if it moves about too much. This I didn't find moved at all, I don't think. And I find the Kuretake Gansai Tambis don't tend to move. But in particular, distress products, distress inks, distress oxides, distress sprays, I find they all are very, very reactive. That is what they are meant to be. They are meant to be reactive. So they are the ones that I have to be extra careful with if I'm going to put them in the background. So when I had this flower originally, my idea was I was going to put it behind as a nice tall flower. But actually, once I'd put her on the page with the moon and she was sort of looking wistfully over, I didn't feel that I wanted anything to be too focal on that side of the page. I wanted her to be the prominent part. So I just cut off, or tore off little bits of the flower. I still wanted it in there, but I decided to rearrange it. So I was thinking, could I have some over there? But I decided no, that wouldn't look right. So I was snipping into it, and this is just, a reminder, as I often need as well. Sometimes we think, oh, if I've cut something out and it looks like this, I've got to use it like that. But of course, it's only paper. So if there are bits on it you don't want, then you can snip them off. If there are things that don't fit what you're doing, snip them apart, rearrange them. And these bits here, they were a bit too big. So what I did was I stuck them on, and then I knew that once it had dried, what I would do is get my scissors and just trim off the edges so that it became a part of the page properly and wasn't hanging off the edges. So I gave it a good dry with my heat tool. Now, I wanted shadowing around this, and quite often if we think about shadowing, we might think, well, you would choose black perhaps. Now, but I find black can often be too intense, so I wanted something different, and I didn't really want a grey or a brown for this one. So a good colour that often people will use for things like shadows is purples or violets. And so I decided to use the Derwent Inktense pencil in violet, and I'm adding that around mostly towards the bottom of the page. I didn't go right up around the moon. I just wanted it to be mostly in the areas where the purple was in the background. So I focused sort of around where her legs were, where her dress was, a bit around her wings, and then around the mushrooms and flowers, just to add some shading and shadowing behind there. Now, despite the fact I said that I find sometimes black can be a bit too intense, I did feel that some of those areas needed a little bit more darkness just to help to bring the images forward. So I did get out my Aall Stabilo Aall black pencil. Now, I got that piece of kitchen towel out because I was just a little bit concerned that if I had too much on my brush, then it would overpower the rest of the colour. I do find with my Inktense and the Stabilo Aall pencils that I find it more controllable to use from the nib of the pencil, but I don't dip them in water. I take a damp brush and I do just take a little bit off the nib, not off of the wood. I don't want to get water in the wood. And that's why I had that tissue there, because I just wanted to make sure I didn't have too much water. That way also you don't get, it doesn't run away with you as much, because the Stabilo Aall I find can be very, very intense if you sort of just put it straight down and then just water it out. Now sometimes that's exactly what you want, but it's about getting to know your materials, getting to know your mediums and how you like to work with them. So if you want a really intense, shadow around your images, you may want to just go straight to the project. But if you're like me, then you might want to take it from the nib of the pencil. Now, I still felt that the images needed something. Now, I'm using my Copic Acrylic Snow White, and I'm not sure if it's starting to run out. It is my most used Copic Acrylic, so it was being a little bit temperamental, which is the first time that's happened. And as I started adding on the white highlights, I did wonder whether it was too much. But what I was doing was I was trying to give it quite a light touch. I was trying to not be too heavy-handed with it, to not give too thick a white line anywhere. So I'm just sort of going random. No, it's not random, but I'm going where I think the highlights might be, but I don't stress over that at all. I'm not, trying to create a work of art that's hanging in a gallery. This is just for fun. And so I sort of just think, well, light would possibly be hitting on the outsides of things and on the tops of things, and you'd get a highlight in the eyes and things like that. So that's really sort of like my rule of thumb when I'm applying highlights to images. Now, I got this sentiment from the Lemon Creation Sentiment sheets, and as it mentioned the Milky Way, I thought that would go with this. Now I thought, oh, maybe I should have a bit more of that washi tape on the page, but when I stuck a whole strip down, it seemed a bit much, so I tore it in half and just added a little piece. And then with this, I thought the sentiment could just go sort of just above that, and it just added a little bit extra to it. So that is the end of my project for today. Thank you ever so much for watching. If you have enjoyed, do please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed, I'd love it if you could subscribe as well. And until the next time, bye-bye.